Everyone, and welcome to the December Social Work Services Committee meeting. One meeting, please. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Just before we start, just to remind everyone that obviously this meeting will be recorded, and the recording will be subsequently be available for public listening. That's it, except the excluded business at the end. Okay, we'll start. Firstly, with the Sederunt apologies. Any apologies?
Apologies from Councillors Carruthers, McGregor and Stitt. There are 16 members present, Chairman.
Thank you. Have we any declarations of interest? Councillor Dick.
Yeah, thanks. Declaration of interest in item 8. As I'm an advisor on the Coronation Day Centre committee, but I do not intend to remove myself.
That's noted, thank you. Anyone else? No. In that case, we'll move on to item 3, which is one of the series of presentations that members asked for. This one is a review of the high-cost care packages, a presentation by some of the review team. Heather, I think you're going to start us off, and Jeff Dean and Ruth Griffiths are also available to answer questions after the presentation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we've been wanting to bring this to you for a few meetings, and we report to you through the way forward. And I know you had a briefing at the last committee as well about the details of the review in terms of number of cases, about figures. So this morning is really about what that work entails around the sorts of cases that people look at and what the outcomes of those have been. But just to sort of set the context for you, first of all, just to remind you really, the fundamental principles of the review were about we wanted to minimise risk to individuals. But we also wanted to use an outcomes-based approach because in terms of trying to develop and embed a personalised approach to all our care, this was an opportunity to demonstrate that. So we went with a review tool that was built around that personalised approach in terms of outcomes, and that was a really important move forward for us. Just to remind you, of course, that review is not just about reductions, that you can review a package and you can increase that package if the need requires that. So this is very much about based on individuals' needs, about whether or not the support and care they've got at present is appropriate for their care. And if it's not, for us to look at what we might do. Now, we do look at whether or not we might reduce that package if somebody's needs have changed and if they've moved on, and you'll hear how we've done some of that from Ruth. We've also had instances whereby we've had no change in the package at all, and therefore things have stayed the same, because the package has been absolutely spot on for that person's needs. And there are times to say when we increase. We haven't got an example this morning of an increase because we haven't done that yet as part of the review. But that does happen in the course of our work, whereby you'd go in, you'd review it, and you would increase the care. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand across now to Ruth, who's one of our social workers who normally works in Annan, and we've pulled her out to work within the review team. And she's going to take you through 3 case studies. And afterwards, we'll answer any questions. You might have questions for Ruth herself. You might have questions about the wider review, which Jeff or I can take. Okay?
Good morning. I'd like to outline 3 different cases, 3 different individuals, very, very varied, very cross-section of what we've undertaken in this work. And showing you 2 where we've reduced quite significantly, and 1 where we have left the package absolutely as it is because we felt it was very appropriate for the level of risk. So the first one we're going to look at, and obviously I've changed the names and some of the details for the people to maintain their confidentiality. The first one is a lady called Jenny. She's in her early 20s and she has a severe learning disability. She has a significant sensory impairment and a history of very, very challenging behaviour. And she spent a considerable amount of her childhood at a specialist residential school out of region. And when the time came for us to start looking at for her to leave school and what was going to happen to her within adult life, we in Dumfries and Galloway, we didn't have a placement suitable for her. And so she moved at the age of 19 into a residential care setting, which was part of the residential school she had been in. Now, it was meant to be for 18 to 25-year-olds. So the plan was always that during this period, we would try and source suitable placement for her and enable her to come back to this region. Her family, she's from a very, very close-knit family. They're very, very involved in her care and support. And all through her time in this specialist school, she came home regularly, and it's a good 2-hour drive to her placement. So the family went up, picked her up, brought her home. She spent holidays here, long weekends, and that went right through up until she moved. When I met the family, they were really clear. We want her back. We want her living within Dumfries and Galloway. And they said to me, we want her back for Christmas. We want her settled in her home for Christmas. So that we started our work in about March. We had then got to source suitable housing for Jenny. There was nothing really suitable coming up through commission services. So we decided we had to think outside the box a little bit. And I became aware of a private tenancy which was situated very close to what we would call a core and cluster. That is a cluster of tenancies which was for adults with learning disabilities. So not only would she be living with ordinary neighbours, she would have a peer group situated very close to her. Took the family to see it. I said to them, this is your decision. I should also say that one of her family members is actually her legal guardian. So she ultimately held the decision about whether she was moving. We looked at the house. They took a long time to consider it, but they all were of the same mind. This was a very good move for her. We agreed on one of our leading specialist providers who would provide all her care and support, and we started the ball rolling. Now, one of our concerns at this point in time was, would housing benefit pay all the rent? Because she was going to need nighttime support within the house. Therefore, it was a 2-bedroom house that we were looking at. And would housing benefit cover all of that? We discovered that if the landlord agreed to sublet to a social housing provider, and then it was sublet to Jenny, that we could actually claim all the relevant housing benefits, and she would also get the housing support element of her benefits, and that everything would be covered. 2 of our leading LD specialists, care and support specialists, are actually registered social housing providers. So that helped, because the people who were going to be supporting her were housing support providers. So we started continuing on. Started the transition process. It was very difficult because obviously the specialist service were very, very upset that she was moving. But I'm glad to say that the transition went extremely well. Jenny took to life in this region very, very easily. She moved in on 1st of December, and 12 days into her tenancy, it's been reported to me that she's doing extremely well, enjoying meeting new people, and she has started a free half-day-a-week placement at the local ARC. So we're providing her with a little bit of structure within her week, and for the rest of the time we're looking for alternative activities as well, and she's already started to engage in them as well. Her family are going to play a crucial role in her life. They want to spend more time than they've ever spent with her, and the plan is that they will be very involved, which means that when they're involved, we won't be providing support to our support provider. So it's very much a 3-way package. We've got the support provider, who are going to obviously provide considerable support. We've got some support from the ARC, and we've also got family support. So it was a very, very personalised approach to this young woman and to her needs. The next person that I want to discuss is a man called Ian. And Ian is in his early 40s, and he's severely affected by autism and has a history of very, very challenging behaviour. And as a result of the challenging behaviour, Ian actually spent most of his childhood in several special education facilities. And he was later placed in Longstay Hospital. In 2005, a decision was taken that Ian was going to move to his own tenancy. And obviously, because of the high level of risk, there was a significant support package put in place to reduce that level of risk, the risk he posed to himself and the risk he would pose within the community. And this involved up to 3-to-1 support. That means 3 workers supporting Ian at any one time. He would have what we called waking night support, which would mean that a worker was in the house at night, awake at all times. And he also had a sleepover worker within the house. So if there was something happening during the night, that worker could be woken up and could assist the waking night worker. In the initial years after he was placed in this tenancy, he began to really settle. And as a result, his behaviours became a little bit less challenging. And in 2008, he was re-reviewed and risks were looked at again. And a decision was taken that he had progressed so far that we could support to once. That was quite a big decision. And in addition, a decision was made to take away the sleepover worker. So at that point, we still had 2-to-1 support at all times during the day and a waking night worker. Now, when we began our assessment, the first thing that came out to us was his sleep pattern. Because information that we were getting was that Ian had now developed a really good sleep pattern. So our first question was, does he still require a waking night cover, and could this be changed to a sleepover cover? So we used assistive technology to check on this. We obviously used all the notes provided by the care provider, but we also put in a just checking system. So that meant that we could actually check when he woke up, or if he moved, did he come out of his bedroom. And after a very detailed risk assessment, it was discovered that actually, yes, he did have a very good sleep. And it changed. So we no longer have a waking night in place for Ian, we have a sleepover support. In addition to that, the provider also said, we think he's ready to reduce some of his support to 1-to-1. We now have very targeted support times, usually within his home, when he's having 1-to-1 support. This is a real clear progression for this man, and it's also now the least restrictive option. He is subject, like Jenny, to legal guardianship, and we are his guardian social work services. But if that is least restrictive and it's in line with the Adults with Incapacity Act, and we would hope that over the next few years that we can continue to reduce Ian's support to 1-to-1 and that he will continue to make progress. And I think that a lot of Ian's progress is down to the fact that he is supported by a care and support provider who provide a very consistent approach to his care. It's very individualised, and it was very much centred around his own challenging behaviour. The third example is Susie, and this is one where we didn't make changes whatsoever. She's a woman in her 50s, and she lives in her own tenancy with significant support. And like the other two, Susie is now also subject to welfare guardianship, and we, the council, are her guardians. Now, over the course of my work with the reviewing team, I have read through a considerable amount of guardianship orders. And I've got to say, I have never seen a guardianship order like Susie has. It's extremely detailed, down to social activities, holidays, or everything like that. She has to discuss, her team has to discuss with her MHO any changes to our activities. That detail. I can't stress highly enough how vulnerable this woman is. She really is at risk of significant harm, and the guardianship was put in place to reduce those risks. After the guardianship order was put in place, we put in the 24-hour care. sleepover worker in her house. After this, she moved to a new tenancy. And where she moved to was, again, what we call a foreign cluster. It was a cluster of tenancies for adults with learning disabilities. And there was a shared sleepover on site. Now, she didn't immediately switch to a shared sleepover. She still had her own sleepover within her house. But as time progressed, and again, with this case as well, the consistency of support provided by the care support provider was instrumental. And Susie herself eventually, with social work, said, "Is there any possibility of my support?" And because of the stability of the situation, it was agreed to reduce her support significantly. Her sleepover worker was removed, assistive technology was put in place. We would know if she opened the front or back door because the doors were alarmed. She knew she wasn't going not to go out into the community on her own. She knew how to call for help through care call. That was all put in place. Susie felt that reduction in care at this time meant that she felt more independent, felt much better about herself. She had time to herself, time to sit around, watch telly if she wanted, or to engage in household tasks. She's actually a woman who's extremely proud of her house and walk into it. See that? Now, when we came in, our assessment, we started looking at her social work files. We read the history from start to finish. We looked at our current care and support plan. We completed a very, very detailed risk assessment of her now. And of course, we met with Susie. And it was very, very clear from our assessment that to reduce this package any further would place this woman at risk once more and at significant risk of harm and exploitation. And even during my visit with her, said something that was very clear to me, that we can keep.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. We're ready. Is that the, yeah, that's everything. So we're ready to go to any questions members may have. Brian?
Thanks, Chair. I noticed, particularly with regard to Claire's presentation on the case study of Ian, that she used the phrase very challenging behaviour, and we hear this very often, but I don't know what it means. And I would like some expansion on that, please.
Okay, Ruth, yeah.
Particularly with people with autism, and particularly like this gentleman who would have very limited communication, and so can become very frustrated when people don't understand what he's trying to communicate. Be quite aggressive, and we often find that. It depends on the person. That there's a varying degree of challenging behaviour. For example, the First Lady, we spoke about Jenny. Jenny engages in a lot of challenging behaviour. She has been known to break furniture, rip her clothing, be violent towards people. Oh, right. Want me to lean forward? You hear me? Yep. She has also been known to deliberately urinate on herself as well. So varying degrees of challenging behaviour, but particularly with people with autism, when they have very limited communication, they can become quite challenging physically.
That covered it, Brian? Joe?
Aye, the presentations are very interesting. I recognise the difficulties you've got. I think the question now is, you've done this, and is this going to be an ongoing process with all these type of care packages, the big ones especially, where there'll be more room for maybe alteration one way or another, and recognising that we're not always going to get savings, but has it got to be an ongoing process now? Maybe I would suggest annually probably, but I'm open to hear what you say.
Jeff's got to pick that up. I think you might need to use that one, Jeff.
That would not work. That's okay. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Now we've started the process, I think it'd be folly to abandon it, and I think it needs to become our practice. And I think the review of high-cost care has shown that we need to review all of the situations we're involved in. That presents a tremendous challenge in terms of staff time and resources. But the things we've learnt through this high-cost care review is that we can move to a more personalised, more locally provided service for people, and in a majority of cases, provide best value as well, better value. So yes, it will need to continue, and we actually met yesterday to think about how we make this team and this process part of our everyday business.
Just quickly, I think on the presentations, I think he showed there that as well as benefiting the council and social work, it's benefiting the client, which is the main thing, obviously. That's good.
Yeah, I think that's a comment. Right, I've got John Syme, Willie, and then John Martin in that order, yep.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I used to deal with groups of people that supported parents with children that were through the system. The package is similar to what you've just described. And a big problem for them was coming out of the children's system, the transition into the adults' children, where a lot of the supports basically disappeared and were more difficult to get. Is that still a kind of ongoing problem with people that are bringing up their children and when they're into the adult system, a lot of the supports tend to disappear?
Yeah, it is something that we think we need to include in the reviewing team, really, that people get a certain service until they're 16, 18, and then it changes quite significantly. We're doing a lot of work on that transition process. And again, the learning from the work we've done so far in the high-cost care package review has been that some people get quite significant packages, actually, on transitioning to adulthood. And it's we need to manage the risk, not just exclude the risk by putting people in a situation where somebody's with them every moment of their day. So for every individual, we need to consider what's best as they transit into adulthood yet. But it is a significant challenge for us, but one we're very aware of, and as I say, working quite hard at the moment with colleagues in health and schools too.
Thanks, Jeff. Just before we move on to the next question, can you explain the transition from adult to older people? That bit about there's a difference in how much we can ask them to contribute. Can someone try and explain that for me?
How long have you got with my bag?
2 seconds.
In many ways, it's an artificial transition, isn't it? Because from 65 to 65, or 65th birthday doesn't really mean a great deal. But there are rules and regulations in place that mean that we can charge certain amounts, and that changes at the age of 65. The review we were doing of adult services is 16 to 65, but we'll look at transitions 65 plus, because I certainly think that there shouldn't be a change in your care situation from 64 and 364 days to your birthday.
Willie next, and John Martin, and Jane.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I want to pick up on Jeff and on what he said in terms of make it our practice. And to the 3 cases, while it was presented as Jenny, Ian and Susie, I could give you another 3 names of cases I'm dealing with. And particularly to the first one that was under the name Jenny, who stayed 80 miles away. I often find that it's financially driven rather than by assessed needs. And I say that in as much as that, the case, and it's been described as, or introduced as Jenny, the one is liquor capacity, and yet the individual would like to return home to a very close-knit community village, not so far away from Stranraer. And she is an indigenous person to the area, the village on which she is. But now she's in a care home, still with health saying that she's got capacity and the family. And I'm not dealing with the individual case. I'm just looking at make it our practice in that for every case there could be a review. And if the money was available, we perhaps would do something else to provide with a two-bedroom accommodation, 24-hour care, and everything else, because that's what's needed to remain within the community. So I'm delighted, pleased to hear the cases of the Jenny. How many more have we got out there that could do with that type of care and that attention on a package similar to the three that were described? Because I could give you a name for Ian, Susie, Jenny within the ward that I represent, and it's more, in my opinion, financially driven than assessed needs and what the individual may be able to live in their own community.
Thanks. Try to work with the question.
The question is making it our practice. If it's not just now, why not? And in terms of making it our practice, then we'll be reviewing literally are we going to do that, is my question.
Jeff, can you come back on that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Indeed, our aim is to review every situation where there is a significant cost, but particularly, as you say, Councillor Scobie, that the need is identified where people are in situations that we would wish to review and wish to make some amendment to. One of the issues here that's come out of this is that we can't just say that somebody needs to live in, for example, Stranraer and move them there immediately. We need to develop resources. We need to develop work with the commissioning team, and the commissioning team are heavily involved in this review. And it is helping us think about future provision. So there's no immediate answer, but yes, this is what we need to do for every situation, such as the ones that you heard about and the ones that you're describing.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Chairman, my question is of you and Social Work Committee, because we are facing austerity, we're facing continual cutbacks and overspend in social work. When are we going to make sure that the budget is available to do what Jeff is saying, so we have the resources? So my question is of you and the committee in terms of when are we going to make the resources available so that it's not a constant reduce? Because we've heard from Jeff that we could be reviewing all the cases and there could be high-risk packages at an expensive cost to it. When is that going to happen, Chair?
Well, I'm certainly not going to preempt next week's budget stuff today. That's just not on the agenda. John Martin.
Thanks, Chair. It was good to see you. We finally got some examples of the high care packages. Just wonder, how many high care packages did we actually review? How many actually did we make savings on? How many did we increase the care on them, and how many stayed the same?
Within the high cost packages, when we set up this process, there were around 100 plus that, where the payments were £1,000 a week or more. So we've increased that amount now. We're up to about 160 where we're looking initially. It is, dependent on staff time being able to undertake the review. So there's a lot of work within this review. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Just how many actually did we make savings on, and how many actually increased the package?
There were very few where we've increased the package. Most have either shown a reduction or have stayed the same. It's difficult to give exact numbers now, but certainly we could provide that to you outside the meeting if that's required. Within the 160, I think we've reviewed over, there is a reviewing process, or we've completed around 100 or so. there's a lot more to do.
Thanks. Just for clarity as well, high cost wasn't the only driver. It's good practice to review, am I right?
Yes, well, when we first start looking at it, as Ruth said in her presentation, there are a number of people placed in situations that have been there for many years, and they hadn't been properly reviewed, and, you know, in line of a more personalised approach, hadn't been reviewed.
Thanks, Jeff. I've got Jane and then Ian Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. You covered the question I was going to ask between older people and adults. Thank you.
Great minds, or we'll finish it. Ian?
I think it's the review of these care packages is very welcome, not least of all from the point of view that there are some who, as a result of the review, will need more, and consequently we have to continually review all packages in order to have a sustainable financial situation. But it seems to me that if there's a constant review being done, the transitional element is probably going to be less severe because you'll have had a history of the care needs over a long period of time. So 65 isn't going to mean as much. I think possibly the 18-year-old, where somebody starts to become independent, is going to be a bit more challenging. But it's quite evident to me that I think the fact that constant reviews being done is going to make things much easier for those in receipt of care. And I'm just grateful to the Social Services Department for having conducted this in the way in which they seem to have started.
Thanks, Ian. Brian?
Just before we go off the subject, Chair, I would just like to say that I'd be very surprised, indeed shocked, if any member of this committee was to feel other than the fact that it's not money that drives the provision of care regardless of cost. It's the priority on the individual client that dominates on what's best for them. It's not the financial consideration.
I think that's echoed throughout the chamber, Deputy Leader. Ivor?
Chair, I think this has actually been a really good exercise for our clients, because what I've seen today is that two of the clients have actually been able to have a more involvement in their own life, and I think that's been very good. We've achieved some financial savings out of it, but I think what we should be looking for is the client first, and I think that's come over, and I would congratulate the team on the work they've done. I think they've done a good job in this.
A person-centred approach is what we're looking for in all client groups. And I think the advances in technology are opening up doorways that we didn't have before. And it is an area that we need to examine and develop. I also think that the demographics, we have an ageing population, and we also have quite a very high increase in people with learning disability. And the other point I would like to make, people do improve, and regular reviews are essential, because we do need to keep a tight control of budgets. Otherwise, we're going to come to a stage where we can't actually provide for emergencies. So I congratulate the team. I think they've done a very thorough report, and I particularly liked Ruth's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ted, you want it in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Most of the questions that I had in mind have actually been addressed, but I'd just like to commend Ruth for the quality of her presentation, which was delivered with a refreshing lack of jargon, and, you know, actually demonstrates the quality of the review process as well. So thank you very much for that.
Okay. That questions finished? Yeah, okay. Just finally, Heather, Jeff, and Ruth, for your presentation. Thanks very much for your time and effort here. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item 4, the Social Services Budget Monitoring Report. for the period ending 31st October. Colin Pentland to take this forward. Colin, is there anything you'd like to add, or a summary of what's in your report?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to do a brief introduction to that report, if that was okay. Good morning. This paper provides an overview of the social work position for the period to the end of October. The paper highlights a forecast overspend position of 264,000, which is an increase of 59,000 from last reported position. This 59,000 increase mainly relates to an increase in expenditure on residential nursing care for the older people services. This has, however, been offset by a decrease in overspend in kinship care, agency placements, residential care for learning disability services, and a reduction in staffing costs relating to learning disability. Although there have been significant changes from the previous report position, the main contributor still remains in the form of the forecast overspend in agency placements, which is currently projected at 160,000. Social work senior management team have plans in place to address this area of pressure, as mentioned in section 4.4 of this report. Improvements to financial and budget management arrangements are being progressed through the Way Forward plan, and the progress of this is subject to further report on this agenda. It should be noted that some of the improvements have resulted in being able to highlight the emerging budget pressures earlier, which has enabled social work to start identifying solutions for these pressures. These pressures are alluded to in section 4, 5 and appendix 2 of this report. Section 6 gives details of a number of savings measures required to balance the budget. Appendix 1 gives a detail of the service spend, and Appendix 3 gives details of changes in the budget as previously reported to this committee. I'm happy to answer any finance questions related to this paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Dick?
Yeah, I'd just like to refer to 4.4. It says that the delay in the opening of the Hardthorn Road facility has had an adverse effect on our finances. I think this project, I think we need a really detailed report into what's gone wrong here. Similar to the Brownhall School and the Education Committee, things went badly wrong there. We need an independent look there to see what lessons can be learned, because I think we don't really have the full details of what's happened here, and we need those details scrutinised and brought before the committee.
Your point's well made, but it's actually the subject of an investigation currently, so therefore it would be inappropriate to discuss it in chamber, because there may be implications wider than just the council. So we're not going near Hardthorn Road per se. We're talking about the overspend, we're talking about the budget. So if you can come back in if it's about the budget.
Yeah, obviously it's a very important effect on the budget, and as soon as we're allowed details, I would like those details to come before us.
As always, I'll be free, open and very transparent on this. Yep. Any other questions? Jane?
Thank you. Yes. Locality, summary by locality, page 13. Could I have just a brief indication about why the stewardship is overspending to the level of 153, projected to overspend?
Colin?
Well, the main area of pressure on that stewardship is within older people services, in particular looking at the residential and nursing care area, in particular nursing care. This has seen a significant increase from the start of the financial year on what was budgeted. Initially there was an allocation of a region of 21 clients, that was the budget for. However, we've seen an increase of 8 or 9 clients above that budget level, which is a significant increase, about 30% increase in that area within stewardship.
You happy, Jane? Ivor?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ivor?
I suppose the counter to that one is Wigtonshire's well underspent. Is that a demographic fact, or is it a fact of different practice in Wigtonshire, which is addressing savings and delivering a service at less than other places?
Colin?
Apologies, I might have to defer that the answer with practice to Sean about the actual practice going on. However, can I provide the figures where we're seeing the different within the pressures. In regards to the Wigtonshire, the two significant areas that it's reduced is older people services, particularly residential care, and also physical disabilities. Again, residential care kind of thing, potentially through clients moving on for various reasons that could have impacted those kind of areas. But for actual practice, I'll unfortunately have to defer that to Sean.
John, can you throw any light on that?
We look to the local senior manager for that area to come and say a few words on that one.
It's, I think it's in relating to two particular factors. One is in terms of the impact of the high cost care package review and how we then look to see how that's reflected across the piece. But as Colin says, the demand in terms of some of the issues around care homes for older people, we continue to be successful in retaining people being provided care in their own homes, and therefore we sometimes can reduce the demand in the care home facilities. That being said, we're always conscious that there's a few cases requiring to be placed in residential or nursing care facilities because of the needs that they present or the risks that they present can take this the other way. It's an indication at this moment in time, something we keep under constant review through the various processes we have in place.
Okay, I've asked the question. Are you happy with that? You want to come back?
So is that the case that practice is different within the area, or has it just been the case of it's fallen out this way, as in you've had the opportunities to find those savings at this time?
I think it's because of the impact of the practice that's been consistently applied across the authority in terms of the high cost care package review. The practice, I would suggest from the information we have in relation to admissions into nursing homes, we are certainly, there's a working group looking at the different thresholds for that and see whether there are any differences in practice. Sometimes the change happens once the person has been placed, for example, in a care home, and then their situation deteriorates and they maybe have to be transferred into what is referred to as a nursing bed within the home or into elderly mentally infirm capacity. So it's sometimes to do with the change in the circumstances of the individuals. And one or two people can make a significant change when you look at the cost per person. So I wouldn't suggest, whilst we continue to work extremely hard in Wigtonshire to ensure that we work within the budget, has been said already, and I will pick up on the issues previously raised by Councillor Scobie in terms of that challenge. Our challenge is to ensure that we meet the need of the people that are presented to us in the most effective way, in a way in which takes them into account. The term co-production is used an awful lot. The first co-production we do is in conjunction with the service user to make sure that what they want and the outcomes they're seeking to achieve are achieved.
You comfortable with that? Yeah. Jane?
Thank you. It's just really picking up on this particular issue, because I mean, I know that the figures for the stewardship were out of kilter with respect to home care as opposed to residential care. They were out of kilter with respect to the rest of the region. I think, I don't know how, but I think I would like to ask how we're going to pick up on that, exactly with the issue that Councillor Hislop is suggesting, that there is a change or a difference between the areas, and I think we'd like a little bit more information about that. Now, it doesn't have to come back to here, but I think I would certainly like to know about that.
Yes, I think I can probably give you that assurance, because there is a review currently underway, and that information will come forward. When is that due to come here, Alan? You're leading it, aren't you?
I'm currently chairing a group that's reviewing care at home, and including some discussions with the third and independent sector providers, as well as our in-house provision. And it's due to be the initial results and progress, and that is due to be reported, as I understand, to committee at the end of January.
Happy, Jane? Yep. Anyone else? In that case, then, we'll just move swiftly on to the recommendations. We note the forecasted overspend. Yep. We note the balancing this budget is dependent on effective management of service demands and receiving 1.1 of identified savings, progress against which is contained in section 6. Agreed? Noted. And note that the social services management team are committed to returning a balanced budget and are actively looking at measures to control expenditure. Okay, agreed? Noted. Thank you very much. Thanks, Colin. We move on to item 5. Councillor Dick, I believe you want to make a statement.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chair. I think in view of the fact that the budget consultation is imminent, that it would be appropriate to defer this item until the completion of the budget consultation after the 17th of January. And I would ask members if they would please accept that and would move so.
Thanks. Before we start, I think before we move on to, I'm not intending to open up a debate on what's actually in the paper at this stage. So could we restrict any comments we're going to make to discussing this proposal from Councillor Dick? If we can get consensus, I would intend to defer this to the Social Work Committee on the 29th of January, which is after the budget processes are completed, and would also allow the officers to bring forward the full information so that we can make decisions based on the most up-to-date information possible. So, I mean, can we get consensus on that? Jane?
Well, speaking as somebody who ploughed through this rather grumpily and tried to put this together with the Chief Social Work Officer report that's coming forward, I'm rather cross about not having known that. If we'd known it would have been quite a bit more helpful. I do have questions to ask about it. So actually, in some ways, and that's overall principle supporting this. So in some ways, actually, no, I'd much rather discuss it.
I mean, we can go to vote if you want, but I'd prefer that we can actually do this in a constructive way. And, you know, can we get a constructive way forward here, or do we need to go to the vote? Ivor?
Just wondering if we could have an officer's view on any risks that might be identified by deferring. If it's fine to go and defer till that time, I'm a wee bit sort of reluctant, but I would accept that due to the fact that, you know, I like, if there's a paper here, to move on with the business in hand. But if there's any risks with not taking forward the paper today, or is it suitable to be taken forward at a later stage?
Governors, is there any risk that you can see?
I'm not aware of any risks, but it could be for Sean to perhaps say if there's any risks to the current structure and not deciding today. I believe that it would go to the full council to decide the process for the appointments. I don't know if the delay in appointing would have a risk on the department.
Okay, so there's no governance risk per se. Sean, are you comfortable with this?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm comfortable with this. There, operational risk, I would say, very minimal. We have the senior management structure still in place. We have an extended management structure in place. So, yeah, I can't see a risk.
Dick?
Yeah, I'm quite happy that we don't make a decision today, but I think if members have got questions, they should be allowed to ask them at this stage, so it'll inform future decisions.
No, the motion actually is to defer. If we actually start to discuss, then we'd have to vote down that motion. So that's why I'm saying, can we leave this until January and have a full free discussion in January after the budget process has been set? It seems quite a reasonable position to take, I would suggest, given that we wouldn't want to preempt and put something in place that could actually jeopardise the budget setting process later in consultation process. We would hate to be accused of pre-suggesting something or putting something into place and then trying to consult afterwards. Dennis?
Chair, budget consultation process, I thought February was the date we would make a decision on the budget.
No, that's when it's actually signed off. It's the consultation finishes in mid-January, Dennis. Jane, did you want in?
Well, let's cut to the chase, and you can vote us down if you want to, but I propose we discuss it today.
Okay, then we have a proposal. Mr. Dick, I'll come in a second. Jock, do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to second Councillor Dick's motion. Chair.
So we have a motion and we have an amendment. Yep. Is everyone clear? Have you got a seconder?
I'll second. I don't see the harm in having some discussion at this point.
Yep.
Chairman, the motion from Councillor Dick, seconded by Councillor McKee, is to defer consideration of this report to the Social Work Services Committee meeting on the 29th of January. The amendment by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Brodie, is to consider the report at today's meeting. So the motion is to defer, the amendment is to consider today. Chairman, motion or amendment?
Motion.
Vice Chairman?
Motion.
Councillor Brodie?
Amendment.
Councillor Collins? Councillor Dempster? Councillor Dick?
Motion.
Councillor Hislop? Councillor Yen? Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Maitland?
Amendment.
Councillor Mail?
Amendment.
Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor Scobie? Councillor Syme?
Motion.
Councillor Tate?
Motion.
Councillor Tuckfield?
Motion.
There are 11 votes for the motion, 4 votes for the amendment, and 1 abstention. The motion is carried.
Thank you. So it's deferred until January committee. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is the assessment of the business plan performance, Chief Officer's assessment. Sean, it's your paper. Have you anything you'd like to add to it, or are you just ready to ask some questions, or with Heather?
I think Heather will give an introduction to this report, and me and her will take any other questions. Heather?
Okay. The report obviously sets out the performance against the service, corporate and statutory indicators that we can report on a 6-monthly basis. The business plan, which you approved in June, has a total of 29 key performance indicators, of which we've got 13 which are specific to the service, 6 are corporate and 10 are statutory. And there are 4 projects, and that includes our health and safety plan. Now, there are 12 indicators that we only report on annually, so they're not included in this half-year report, and therefore that leaves us with 16 at the half-year. And of those 16, we have 13 on track, and we have 3 which are not on track, and where the performance is outside the acceptable limit. That's where you get the red circle. Now, that represents just over 80% of our indicators being on track, and comparing this to the half-year report for last year, in 2012, we were able to report at that point that 65% of our indicators were on track at the same stage of reporting. So it's quite useful to see that comparison in terms of that shift in performance. There are a series of appendices with this report, and I'll just tell you briefly what each of them is for. The at-a-glance one takes you through each of the indicators and tells you what the position is. The exception report highlights for you certainly the 3 indicators which are not on track, and that's 2 of those are the absence management indicators. But you'll see that while we're not at the target, we're continuing to make really good progress towards that target. And the capital expenditure target, which is, although it's shown as not meeting the target, we're now in the final stages of that work, and so hopefully by the next reporting period that will have come through the covalent system. And I understand as well that you've got a report coming in January, or February, sorry, which will outline sort of the development around that and the community service centres that relates to. We've also included in the exception report for you the revenue expenditure indicator, because it shows as being on target, and yet we know we have an overspend as described by Colin earlier. So we have included it in there so that you can see that because of the size of the overspend at the minute, it doesn't trigger the parameter within covalent to dip it back into either yellow or red. So that's why you're seeing that. It's not a big enough shift. And it may be that we want to go back and have a look at the parameters and how they're at the tolerance rates in covalent so that we can bring it through perhaps when it's this level of overspend being shown. But we felt that in the absence of that at the minute, we should include it for you so that at least you can see it in respect of the rest of the performance. We've also included 2 indicators where our performance exceeds the target, and this includes the number of children who've had 3 or more placements. That continues to sort of improve, although our note of caution in that would be that a number of the children who've had maybe 3 or more placements will be fairly historical now, and that will take a while to come out of the system. but it does show the sort of the improved sort of approach to trying to make sure that children have as few placements as possible in terms of best practice. That's what we would always seek to achieve. But sometimes things will happen, or there'll be an emergency which requires an additional placement, and that, of course, will then impact on this indicator. And also, we have highlighted for you we continue to perform well in terms of the number of home care hours we deliver, but I've included it because it clearly then has an impact on our resources and on the budget reporting. So, you know, it's not a sort of a one whereby we're trying to push it up and there's no impact. We've always performed, certainly over the last number of years, we've performed really well at this level, and it indicates that bit about trying to keep people at home as independent as possible, but that does then have an impact on resources. Then there are two other appendices which you normally wouldn't get. One is a small number of proposed changes in Appendix 3. We're suggesting that in terms of the calculation of the number of people who were able to maintain at home independently against the number of people in residential care, we've shown it previously as a ratio, and we don't think that's necessarily the easiest way to understand what that is. So our suggestion is that we will change that to a percentage for you, and you'll be able to see the straight percentage between the number of people that we support and the number of those who are still maintained at home, and therefore the number in residential care, and that we just think that will make it easier for all of us to understand. So that will come through in the next reporting period, and that's also been fed through into the indicator on that sits in the SOA. And the other couple of changes there are the inclusion then within area reports of a number of indicators that different area committees have asked to have that level of detail in their area report. So we've included that so that we can then, from the next reporting period, ensure that that's in all of the area reports as well. And Appendix 4 then gives you the summary of progress. What we've tried to do from area committees is collate the recommendations or decisions that were made there in terms of through to this committee in relation to performance, so that we can show what you were asking for at area level, and we can show what we've been able to do with that. I think we've been able to manage all of the issues. The one that shows in Appendix 3 on the community payback orders, we're still working on the indicator to make sure we get the indicator right before we bring it back to you. But as I say, the other ones in terms of reporting to area committees hopefully now have been sorted. You won't necessarily see that all coming through the January area committees, but you'll see that in the report after that. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Heather. I know some of them actually reflect some of the changes that came back from area committees and scrutiny committees and things like that, and they've all been incorporated into as you're moving forward. Am I right? Yeah.
Yes, we've incorporated them when we could, but in terms of just the reporting periods, the next area committee will report on the half-year position at the end of September. So some of the changes to the actual breakdown you won't see till the following reporting period coming through the area report. So we put the ones in we can do really quickly, and as I say, it won't cover them all, so don't be surprised if you still see some gaps in your January report.
Thanks, Heather. I've got Jock first, then Jim, then Ivor.
Right, thanks, Chair. Just seeking clarity, please. On page 72, you've got capital spending value 160.94, target 100%. Could you explain what the value means, please?
So tell me which bit of that was that you were looking at again?
Sorry, it's page 72 under capital spending, effective use of resources. Capital spending, projected capital spend as a percentage agreed capital plan, social work services. Value is 160.94 and the target's 100%. Could you just explain what the target is?
Yes, sorry. My understanding is that last year when we reported on this, we were putting together, it was to do with the sort of the pull through of monies that hadn't been spent. So the programme on, I think it's the community service centres, that all hadn't been spent last year. And so that was pulled forward in order to finalise that work. And so that then shows us that percentage at this point. Once that's finished, then hopefully that will shift. Does that make sense?
I think that this is like, if you remember, area committee when the fire raising, they had as many fire raising incidents as they had that showed up as an exception report. So like almost like we're encouraging people to fire raise rather than put the fires out, right? And I think this is kind of one of these anomalies, Jock. Okay, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. I see it's encouraging the way we're addressing the employee absence. I think that's good working with HR. The question I've got is on page 78 as well, about capital spending. And I suppose you'll read into a report what you want to read into it. It says on how are we performing H1 2013-14. Phase 2 of the Community Service Unit project nearing completion. Detailed proposals for the final phase for the unit in Upper Nithsdale will be presented to Social Work Services in February. Does that mean we're having a unit built, or is it just be detailed proposals of what the outcome might be? And I knew Alan would respond to that.
Exactly. We'll let the criminal justice expert.
Ben Johnson, the way you come up there.
We didn't want it leaked that we're actually closing it down up on this deal. Right.
It would seem that it wouldn't be like a social work committee without this question being asked, Jim. No, it's in terms of the detail of what's going to be built will be presented in terms of the type of unit. We are still committed, and as I indicated the last time this was raised, the figures clearly indicate the ongoing need for some sort of facility in Upper Nithsdale, whether it will be the same nature in terms of the service, the specification for the building as some of the others. Each of the units that have been constructed, including the latest 3 that are moving towards completion, vary slightly differently. They've got slight differences in terms of the specification. What I'll be bringing is in terms of the specification and the timescales for the build.
I would have to say, Chair, that's very good news. It's something I've been hoping would happen for a while. And the one in Dumfries would be a good project to use as a standard for the year in Upper Nithsdale. And maybe we'll get the opportunity briefly to discuss with you before it comes to committee just what you propose and where the location might be.
Happy to do so.
That would be both members or 4 members, because there are 4 ward members. I think that you maybe at best ask 4, and however many turn up, that would be useful in the occasion.
Well, nice to have 1 happy member. Ivor and then John Syme.
It's with relation to the indicator on page 75, the exception report with regard to staff returning to work or sickness absence. Is there anything that you can say out of the action plan that has had a really positive effect to actually address that figure? You know, which part has actually worked well, or is it just the generality of the whole thing? Another thing is, within this report, I think it was DG first had a report about health and safety incidents. Could we maybe look at that in future reports, maybe if it's a year-end one, so that we can actually have an eye on health and safety issues within the department?
Okay, in terms of the sickness absence one, in a sense it is about a number of things coming together and working well. But I think there's been a huge effort within the service around identifying where the issues are, about encouraging managers in particular to make sure that all of the return to work interviews are completed, and that therefore people are much more aware of the issue about the impact their absence has. So I think it's that sort of combination, and I think senior management team have kept a really close eye on it and have had conversations with HR on a regular basis so that we're very clear about what the progress is and where the sort of the issues might be, and therefore able to go and deal with those. So I think we're all really encouraged at how well it's working. We're not quite there yet, but certainly it's moving in the right direction. And sorry, in terms of the health and safety one, yes, in this report we've just given you the sort of the top level really. We haven't given you the details, so we will need to think about how you want that detail reported back, whether that's at the year end or whether that's as a separate sort of report really. But we've got that if need be.
Well, given the health and safety stuff should be embedded in their day-to-day practice, And it was decided quite a number of years ago now that because it was embedded in practice, it shouldn't be an exception report per se, it should be encompassing everything we do. So maybe a regular update would be good for us to actually show that we're properly auditing and scrutinising the health safety function.
Could I suggest then that maybe what we do is we put an appendix perhaps to the performance report, so the next one would be the end of year one, but that we'd make sure then that both for the end of year and the half year, we have an appendix which specifically looks at some more of the detail around health and safety.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant, thank you. I think that would just satisfy everyone. John Syme.
Thanks, Chair. Just like Jim's question, this is on a sort of recurring theme as well, and Jeff might come running up for this one. It's on page 77 again. We mentioned that agency placements are a big sort of drain on the budget. Some time ago, we had a seminar at the Crichton on trying to engage with private providers that are working within the region, mostly looking after children from out with the region, but quite often with places available. And it was always an idea in mind that we look at these to see if they could provide in-house, because when we've got out-of-region placements, it's not just the high cost of them, it's the cost of providing family visits, for contact, social work visits and all the other things, plus it is putting our kids out with region. At the time, we were supposed to have a follow-up to engage with the providers of these establishments, but to me it never happened. I know, I think Jeff did personally with some of them, but I do think there is the opportunity there to engage with some of these places that didn't have near the problems that we have in providing a facility. They seem to be in there for a year, do old buildings and be in there and be able to operate. So I think we should engage with them a wee bit more again to see what they could provide and to see that they can maybe accommodate some of our children at reasonable rates. And I think that would be a big help in this problem. I don't know if Jeff's still communicating with some of these providers, but I do think we need to look at these. They're here in-house, and I don't think we're using these facilities.
Again, John, your point's well made, and I think a lot of the things you're actually raising are we covered in the review that's actually currently taking place. When's that due to come, Jeff?
Not quite as nimble on my feet as Alan, but the specific issue about engaging with providers, we still meet with them regularly, and we still have a lot of discussion about what is required locally, particularly with some of the thinking around autism and how we respond to the growing demand there. So there is a great deal of contact, and the number of children out of region, if you like, has reduced significantly over the last number of years, so that's working. There will always be the need to place some young people at some distance from their home, which is unfortunate, but as I say, we still meet regularly with them. The review of the childcare, the residential childcare strategy is what I presume you mean, Chair, is it? Well, now that the two units have been established in Stranraer and in Dumfries, we said we would come back, so as soon as committee requires, we can come back with an update on that strategy and proposals for future developments, whenever that's required.
It's just another point on that. We hear quite often that when out-of-region placements are explained, that the onus is put on the children's panel and sending them there. But are the children's panel members available of some of the facilities that are available in this region? I know they visit some establishments where they might have to use for children, but are they aware that there is places here within region that maybe have the capacity to send the children to?
Yes, thanks. We do supply them actually. They've regularly asked for a list of the local providers, and we do provide that. We would try to encourage the members of the children's panel to think about alternatives to residential placements at all times. But yeah, they do have that the information, and they, as you say, they have visited some of the local providers and have some fairly regular contact with them.
Thanks. Okay. Anyone else? In that case, then we'll move on to the recommendations. Obviously, we've reviewed it, 2.1. 2.2, we've scrutinised the exception reports. 2.3, can we approve the proposed changes to current performance indicators at Appendix 3? Agreed. And 2.4, we've reviewed and can we give consideration approval of items these detailed in the progress as in Appendix 4? We agreed on that? Agreed, thank you. Okay, so we'll now move on to item 7. Thank you, Heather. That's you again. Okay, item 7. Heather, again, it's you taking us through this. Is there anything you'd like to add, or have you a brief summary of what you'd like to say?
Okay, this is the way forward update. We brought this to you sort of at every committee for the last almost a year, not quite a year. And we started the work in November 2012, as you know, and we've given you those regular updates. But in this update, what we've tried to do is giving you sort of more of the context of the wider position around change and improvement, so that you can see where the work within the Way Forward programme begins to link across into sort of everyday business, as it were, and in order for us to start moving some of that across rather than it being seen as a separate work stream. So in section 3, we've outlined the links to the business plan for you, and some of the key processes that we think we're beginning to establish within core business, and that includes sort of some of the work around budget monitoring, the development and implementation of an escalation process, for example. You know, those are both things now that come out of this work but are now firmly embedded in how we do our business. Section 4 then outlines for you the views of the scrutiny group as they oversee the progress that we're making, and it highlights the need there, as we move more of the work from this programme into core business, about the need to make sure that we're still able to update you on progress being made. And we need to think about that further, possibly maybe in the next report that comes through, so that we're really clear that you're still getting those updates. Section 5 then takes you through each section of the work plan, and we've tried to highlight the key progress and the challenges that we face. And so the examples of that would be leadership. You've already considered the restructure report, which we've referred to, and we've highlighted there 2 pieces of work going on. One is the management development work that we're just implementing for senior social workers. So that's about making sure that our senior social workers are well equipped to run the business on a day-to-day basis. And that is being run in tandem almost, and certainly to complement a corporate leadership programme which has now been put out to that same group of staff. So that actually gives us a really good platform to move off in terms of developing the leaders within the service. Under financial recovery, which is obviously one of the bigger areas of work under this plan, we've got a number of areas of improvement, but again, remaining challenges. The budget monitoring that I've referred to has been welcomed across the service and seems to be working well, and we're really pleased with that. The improvements that have been made there has made it easier for people to understand what's coming through and how to work, therefore, and manage their budgets. In terms of income and invoices, the work on invoices is progressing really well. And you'll recall that we put in additional resource in here to pull through the backload of invoices so that we could get them across and working well. So we're continuing to monitor an agreed model that we have across all localities, which will see sort of hopefully this improving so that we get a really consistent approach to it. The variation management report, which is about reporting on the variation of care. So when somebody needs their care varied, it comes through into this report, and that impacts on the invoice processing and development, etc. as well. So again, we've looked at ways in which we can strengthen that, so that we're triggering much earlier, possibly, that people need to have a full review. If, for example, someone's coming through with 3 or 4 variations within a month, then somebody needs to go and have a review of that care package. So that's been triggered at a much earlier stage than it would have been. And the work on savings, we continue that work, and Colin will have referred to some of that in the finance update. Certainly the review of care packages that we've talked about, work on block contracts, which is also part of the review on care packages, because that's looking at individual needs within those block contracts, and also the negotiation of support from Putting You First, which we're taking forward, and we're hoping to maintain that really encouraging progress on that one, but we'll monitor it really closely to make sure that that's going in the right direction. The section then on improving business systems sets out for you, again, the last time I reported on this, we were just about to embark on the data refresh programme in terms of looking to the corrections. The data refresh is complete. The first level of corrections with one locality is complete, and we've lined up the 3 other localities. They will all be done in January. So by the end of January, we should have a set of data in our system which is robust and which we feel we actually can work with and is as good as we can get it, really. And in relation to that, then, we're looking at the quality assurance measures that we need to put in place to ensure that we don't slip back into how things were previously, really. And so what we're doing is we're pulling together a quality assurance framework for the whole service, which pulls together all of the existing measures we've got, and that will allow us then to identify whether there are any gaps in those quality assurance measures, and we can then think about how might we resource those gaps, and that then will support the work that's been ongoing with the data refresh. The work on the proposed system for self-directed support is well underway, and this is about ensuring that before the rollout of that legislation on the 1st of April, that we have in our system a new process which is based around that personalised approach and based around the 4 options within the SDS legislation. However, I mean, this is a huge piece of work, a huge shift for the service, so we will get those basics done by April, and we'll still be working on a lot of those things post-April because that's the nature of the work there. So we'll continue to come back to you and report that one back. We have defined now the information needs. So again, we're really clear about what information does the service actually require. So if we're delivering an effective social work service, are we clear we've got all the information that's required to do that? And we've matched that up against our systems and the development system for SDS. The final 2 sections then, 5.4 is about the level of staff engagement. And again, I think the last time I spoke to you on this, we had just finished the engagement towards the end of the summer in relation to the staff restructure, which was very positive, and we need to look at ways to continue to involve our staff in those discussions and really encouraging increasing use of our SharePoint site for staff, which is people are able to go now and are able to find almost anything they need in relation to the service about information, policy procedures, etc., is all in one place. So that's really positive. And the last section about intelligence for planning and resource allocation, we acknowledge there that the work certainly in terms of improving business systems and some of the finance stuff will actually inform some of that. So again, some of that hasn't maybe gone as far as you might expect, but we need those other things to be in place first. But what it does outline for you is the range of service reviews that we've currently got underway, which again, we've got a reporting schedule for those coming back to committee so that you can see the progress on each of those reviews. And I think that starts in January or February. So I'm more than happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, then I've got Ian, Dick and then Jane.
Thanks, Chair, and just commend the service for the quality of this report, and I think it evidences what we all had wanted at the outset of this process. Can I just ask one thing, or 2 things actually? On the priorities in 3.3, it says prioritise and maximise effective use of available resources. Presumably, obviously, that'll be impacted by the progression of integration. And are we doing any work with NHS at the moment to even start identifying resources which can be of common use? And the second thing, I've probably had this answer before, but I'm still having difficulty getting my head around it. It's quite encouraging to see in the level of invoices are being managed much more effectively. What difference does that make to the social services budget if our money's coming in quicker? Or is our budget predicated on a headline figure, whether it's about to be invoiced but not received? How is that reflected in a budget, if you understand what I mean? If we're getting the money in quicker there, is it making any difference to the overall budget of social services?
Okay. Sorry? Okay. Well, I might want I'll ask Colin to come and give you the detail of the second part of that question, just so that I get it absolutely right. But in terms of the first bit around the priority and maximising effective use of resources, I think that's, if you look across a number of things we're doing at the minute, the changes and improvements we're making ourselves, the whole bit about how we shift our practice, part of that has got to be consideration of how we might need to move our resources around the system to do that. So some of the work around how we develop a personalised approach, for example, we're trying to take a look to say what difference does that make in terms of maybe how we staff our teams. So when we get to those levels, those lower levels of the structure, part of that thinking will have to be, can we structure that in a way that allows us to use those resources to best effect, given that we're operating personalised approaches. So what we would say there would be that the involvement of some of our staff might change and might shift, and we might be able to get them to focus on other things, particularly some of the early intervention, prevention stuff. That links as well to the work around that we do in partnership with the NHS around putting you first, in terms of thinking about how we might look at some of those tests of change and pull through some of the learning there to think about what we do about our resources. And it's also helping us to look as well in terms of, are we sure that the resources we're using, again, back to the review work, that some of that work when the review and working particularly with the NHS on that, to say, are we sure that we've got some of this right around if someone needs quite complex care in terms of who should actually sort of pay for some of that, and should that be shared between us, or should we pick up all of that, or should all of that go across to the NHS? So it's a really quite a complex picture in terms of doing some of that. And that's sort of some of the modelling that we're trying to do around different ways of working. So the service reviews as well will be bringing this in around one of those questions about what impact does that have on that best use of resources, really. So I hope I've answered your question.
Sorry if I wouldn't mind coming back. I think it was a little more fundamental than that. I was just wondering if the social services and NHS are discussing or mapping out the resources that are available to them. I don't just mean different ways of working. I understand that, and there probably is. I mean, the bed, people coming out of hospital and going into social services. I'm thinking something more fundamental, IT systems. Are we commonly identifying what systems we've got at the moment so that we both know what each other's got, and when it comes to integration and perhaps moving at one building, we have an idea of what each has got. So we've actually started doing that work now, so that we don't have to wait until there's some kind of integration model. I mean, fundamental to me is that you do an asset management plan for both organisations and share it with each other, and then you know what each other's got and what you can use.
Yes, my apologies. I misunderstood your initial question, really. In terms of those, there's a number of pieces of work. The IRF framework, which again Colin might talk more about more than I will do, was looking very much about what are the resources between health and social work, and trying to work that down to activity around what do we do in each area, and how then when we come to integrate that, what will that look like, what will be the detail of that, and therefore what will be the resource available to the whole system. So that work is underway. And there's thinking as well around some of the IT system. Some of the work has started to think about some of that. We haven't got as far as actually saying this is what it might look like, or this is how we'd want to take it. But certainly both sort of IT, certainly TS from our end and the IT team in health are having conversations about how could we do that. And we've got some examples of that already where they're testing some of that out. So for example, work with the hub in Dumfries, where they're beginning to look and say, can we test out whether or not we've got an easy system to transfer information? And that's seen very much as, if we test it out at this stage, that will give us some learning, and then think about what would the bigger sort of wider sort of system changes be that we'd need. So some of that is underway. It may be that we need a full report back on some of that detail.
Okay, just to add, it's a council-wide response and a council-wide integration with the NHS, and I can confirm the work streams actually can contain multi-agency input, from within the council, so multi-departmental input. So just for a bit of clarity there, I've got Jane. Then you want the budget question, yeah?
I would say there's probably two areas that assists us with, not just the council, but the providers we work with. For example, by reducing the outstanding balance, it's helped the providers out there with their cash flow situations rather than waiting for money for delays for that perspective. So that's a positive, obviously, for the people we deal with. The second side of it is the council's probably previously reported in the audit report was that we usually relied on historical spend as a way of our forecasting mechanism, while the management information system, the data cleansing was going on, kind of thing like that. So with the movement towards the data cleansing going well, and then the invoicing processing catching up, we can use that as a reconciliation to make sure to double check that the data's right and we're getting invoices kind of thing coming through that's matching into them kind of thing. So it's a two-way process that fills into to ensures that everything's working well kind of thing. I hope that answers your question. Or
Jane, and then Graham, and then Jim.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I read this report and I do believe that the Council's social work house is being put in order, and I commend a very great deal of what's in this report. However, I will point out that in section 5, which concerns challenges and impact of improvements, leadership, accountability and capacity, you have surveyed 346 members of staff about leadership, Chairman, and I would suggest to you that alarm bells are ringing that you don't feel capable of discussing the critical issue of the management structure for social work. You've refused to do that before the budget. You're expecting us to discuss this in the budget, and you're expecting us to think about the needs and the costs. At the same stage, you haven't allowed us to think about it here. So we're going to find something plonked down in front of us when we have not actually thought about it. I would expect to be able to discuss that and think about it, what is needed, rather than before it simply arrives. You think about what you need and then you go and get a budget. So with respect to Councillor Dick's issue about integration of health and social care, I would like to have known how leadership, capacity and accountability was all going to take account of the needs that we have with respect to the integration of health and social care. And frankly, as I say, alarm bells are ringing that you won't let us discuss the management structure that we actually need as a committee before you suddenly plonk this in front of us with respect to the budget. I wonder if you could help me.
Well, I'm not revisiting the previous item, and I'll reiterate what I said then, and what the council, the committee decision was, is that that will be deferred. We've also got an assurance both from governance and from the Chief Social Officer that no risk will be placed on this council. So that the existing senior management team are perfectly capable at this moment in time to take this whole thing forward. And as you're aware, that's actually remitted to the Partnership Board. So whilst this is a general review of the way forward update, it is just that. It's not the paper on the way forward. It's informing us where they are with all the separate processes. And I hope I've answered your question there, but I'm not sure because I kind of lost the thread, Jane, halfway through. So if I've not covered it, can you come back and tell me what I've not covered?
I go back to the issue that we are being asked to review leadership, accountability and capacity. We are told that a set of proposals for a sustainable senior structure have been developed and are being presented to this committee. Well, they've been presented, but we've ignored them. And we're being told that we are not going to be permitted to consider the management structure for social work until the budget discussions. And my view is that we, as a committee of social work, should discuss what our needs are, which will include the health and social care integration model, before it goes to the budget system. We should have an opinion upon what we need for this service. And that is why I find it extraordinary that we are being asked to ignore the work that has been done so far on a management structure. We are not allowed to discuss it. And as I say, I am concerned by that.
Not allowed to, it's not allowed to discuss it. It was already discussed. That part of the process, it was earlier, it was a result of a decision of this committee that will be deferred. End of story. We'll have to live with that, Jane. That's a decision. And we're not using a back door to come in and discuss it now. So I'll move on. So the next one is Graham, please. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding review of care. Can care providers change the care packages, or do they have to come through yourselves? Because obviously that'll affect the budget.
Yep.
There is provision. This is why when we talk about variations, this is why we talk about variations, because there has to be provision for providers where there's something that happens, fairly quickly or immediately that needs an immediate response, that there will be a change made. But those are minimal changes. Those are small changes that can be maybe an hour here or an hour there. If it's anything more than that, any more fundamental change, that needs to come back. And that's where, in terms of the variation management report, we're hoping that will help us to trigger those reviews much more quickly about those more fundamental reviews that are required if it's a greater change than, say, an hour or two. I think what has concerned us has been that we've maybe had some people whereby there have been quite a number of variations to their package, which then, if you look at it, that would have an impact on budget. And the sooner we know about that and we can go in and do that review of that package, then we're in a much better position to control it. So it's a yes and a no, but it's a controlled yes, if that makes sense.
What about that it's an emergency?
If it's emergency, we would expect providers to put in whatever care was required to cover that emergency and to contact us immediately as well. So part of the emergency plan for them would be to ring us to say, this has happened, and we would probably, our staff, our social worker on the ground would say, well, you need to do that, just do that. And we would then take it up through our own process to get that approved.
Okay, Jim?
Thanks, Chair. My question's on page 91, 522. I think maybe got 3. It talks at the very last part of the paragraph about £100,000 being outstanding in October and the same predicted for mid-July. Is it the same £100,000 we're talking about, and will there ever be a situation where all these matters are resolved and we get a zero figure, or is there always be a delay in determining exactly whether or not the invoicing is appropriate? I think that's the first question. The second one is, sometimes there are temporary changes in invoicing on care packages, and we've learned that caused a problem, and I note that there's been a lot of work done in it, so I presume you can give us an assurance now that even if it's a 1 week change or whatever, that will be speedily addressed. And the last thing is in routine, or what we've agreed payments to service providers. Are we now paying them very regularly? And if it is in arrears, how long in arrears? Is it a month in arrears or 2 months or whatever? Because there is an issue about cash flow for many of these providers. And I know that's the very reason this particular element in the papers here is to explain to us where we are with that. I just want some confidence that we're close to being where we'd hope to be.
Okay, I'll let Colin answer the third part of that question, if that's okay. In terms of the first part, which is about the invoices and the 100,000, what we've put is that it's in terms of invoices under query. So in a sense, there will always be some invoices that we'll be querying. So whilst we're working to bring this level down as far as possible, then part of that 100,000 may be some of those original backlog, but some of them are probably invoices that are currently under query, whereby we're going to have we go back and we check that it matches with the care plan before it's signed off. So that's where we continue to have that, but we're really making inroads into that backlog and really bringing that down. So we would expect then to get to a level whereby you would have a tolerance around the amount of invoices that would be under query at any one time, and we would then be looking to monitor that to make sure that that didn't shift, because if it did, then that would indicate to us that something was actually not quite right. So that's that one. In terms of the temporary changes, that's part of that. It's 2 bits of it. One is about the invoice process, but the other bit of it is about the variation management. So it's about the more robust we get around managing the variation, then the less impact that should have on our invoicing, so that we're keeping on top of that with providers around what they need to invoice us for, any changes they need to make to those invoices, and those then can be matched as soon as they come through the system and paid. And in terms of the timing of the invoices, I'll just let Colin do that one. He probably knows more than I do on that bit.
Apologies, I don't have an exact answer. We'd probably have to look into that and get back to you. But in theory, from the figures we're having here, the suggestion is because the reduction in outstanding invoices sitting there, that should in theory improve the cash flow of the organisations. That is generally the council. The council has a policy that from receipt of invoice, we'd have the invoice paid within 30 working days from receipt of the council, and that. So with these figures here and these debts coming through, that's highlighting the manager for trying to reduce that to the more acceptable level rather than having outstanding queries previous there. But if you wish, we take that forward and discuss what the situations with the organisation.
Thanks, Chair. No, I'm happy with that. And the organisation that contacted John and I, we can catch up with them and see whether or no their invoices are now being paid promptly, because that was one of the issues. And the other issue, which is slightly different from what I was trying to say, was they sometimes changed the invoice because they hadn't completed the work they were contracted to do. So it was nothing to do with an arranged change, and that's why I used the word temporary. But what happened was, as soon as they invoiced for less than we expected them to invoice for, we declined it, and then there was an examination. That was being a protracted exercise. So I'm pleased if that's being dealt with, and if it's in hand, I'm satisfied with that as well, as long as it's being looked at in the due process.
Thank you. Colin, yeah?
Apologies, what I should have also said was within the 30 days, that's an invoice that's matched and reconciled. If there's any queries with regards to invoice, there can be delays outside the 30 working days, but an invoice comes in clearly agreed and reconciled to what we've got. The onus is paid within 30 working days is a conformance indicator, but if there's queries, there might be certain delays. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Happy with that, Jim? Yep. Okay, Ivor?
Now, I'm accepting the decision of earlier with regard to item 5, but I would like a wee bit of information regarding the last sentence in 5.1.2, where we're looking at the rest of the structures. Will there be any budgetary information coming forward to our January meeting to allow us to take a decision with regard to item 5, along with do we need to hold any budgets for other structures? Will that be in there, or has that now been put on hold because of the decision earlier?
No, the full budget implications and everything as it goes forward will be dealt with at the time, and obviously we can't be accused of prejudging exactly what Jane's point was, and first a sympathy with the view. We clearly can't be seen to actually have a budget position before we've actually finished the consultation process. That's the thrust of the matter. Yep. So in the absence of any more questions, this is one of these I find quite bizarre. But the recommendations that we asked to review, right? Well, we've already done that. Being summarised, so I'm just happy to note where we are just now. Well, we might not all be happy where we are, but there isn't actually something to go here. It's an update paper, and we review the update, which we've done. Okay. Joe?
Just a quickie, I think somebody mentioned it earlier on. I think the team have to be congratulated on how far they've progressed. Obviously, there's a lot more progression needing done, but I think they should be congratulated on what they've done up to now. It's been long overdue, I think.
Okay, thanks very much. That's noted and will be minuted. Thank you very much, Heather. Colin? Jane?
Very happy to note that as well. I think we should include in it that we were unable fully to review the leadership, accountability and capacity section.
Yes, and I would add because of the earlier decision of this committee.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can make sure that's minuted, Jane. Thank you. So thanks very much to the two of you. We'll move on to item 8, supporting older people in their communities, voluntary day centres. Report writer is Matthew Healy. So welcome, Matthew, first time.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll try and be gentle with you. We've got the paper in front of us. Is there anything you'd like to add to it? Is there a summary, or how could you summarise it?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I'll just take a few moments to introduce the report. The report deals with the issue of voluntary day centres across the region, and in particular deals with an issue regarding funding in 2014-15. We've got 10 voluntary day centres across the region, which in 2013-14 will cost us a total amount of just over £568,000. The intention, Chair, was for us by 1st of April 2014 to have a new tendered service in place across this service provision. But given the timescales around integration, it's now considered appropriate to delay that tendered service for one additional year to 1st of April 2015. However, if agreed, that position requires us to continue funding existing services for that one additional financial year at a cost to the service of £568,000. Part of the funding that we're using in 2013-14 to fund the centres, approximately £100,000 of the total, is currently obtained from PYF sources. Therefore, continuing to fund the centres at the total cost does provide a potential cost pressure to the 2014-15 social work budget. And within the report, we've identified a range of sources that we will look to attempt to minimise the impact on the social work budget. And if agreed, we will use 2014-15 to carry out a detailed review of the service provision in this area prior to integration. And just as a final point, Chair, I would note that reports regarding day centres have in the recent past been reported to the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board. But as this report relates directly to a social work funding issue, the report's been brought to this committee.
Thanks, Matthew. I've got a number of people wanting in straight away. I've got Ivor, Ian, and then Dick, and then Jane. I thought you were just waving to me there. Ian?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I made my declaration of interest earlier on, but I would be more than happy to move these recommendations. And what I would also like to say is I would like to see an end to this. As long as I've been in this council and involved with a local day centre, there have been problems with the funding which have involved a huge amount of officer time. It's involved discussions at a strategic committee, which in my opinion should never have been at. It's involved local members having to assuage the fears of many of our vulnerable and people who run these centres, not least of all who are largely volunteers. It's involved uncertainty for staff and the people who use it. So I would say, in moving these, that next year we have a proper financial system in place where we don't have the kind of uncertainties and problems which are occurring at the moment. I fully accept it's going to involve some funding model. It's going to be, it will be subject to integration of sort and an assessment of the service. But quite honestly, for the amount of time that it's cost this council to deal with the problems that are caused by uncertainties, we seriously need to get some kind of model in place.
Exactly. I think that we have to recognise we've got 10 day centres, we've got 10 communities, we've got 10 totally individual circumstances, and it's the difficulty actually trying to get a region-wide policy, core policies, and again still meet the needs of that local, very local community. So, Dick, you were next.
Thanks, Chair. I was just a very brief report, so I'm just querying. It's our intention that day centres receive the same amount of money as they do this year, next year, and that includes the Annan Day Centre, which we recognised last year as having that we recognised that we had to meet the needs of that community there as well.
Yeah, the answer to this, yes. Matthew, you want to expand on that?
Absolutely. Yes.
You've got two yeses.
Yeses, so I'll go for the third yes then. Right, I think we also need to look at this. The whole thing, as Ian says, we've got to get a way forward quickly because it's about 5 years since we've been trying to get an open, transparent and fair system in place. And I think we've also got to think, is the tendering process the best way forward, or is there a better way forward? Because in a tender situation you expect a competitive process, but I don't think that's, not in our area, I don't think that's going to ever happen. So I think we need a process where council and the health service have a prescribed service which meets the needs of of older people, and we have an agreement with the day centres that they meet the needs of the people.
Yeah, I'll come to that at 2.3, but your point's well made. Okay. Jane?
Well, I just want to get the context of this. We've got 30,000 plus over 65s in this region. 30,000. There are 450 users of day centres. And I am absolutely in agreement with Councillor Dick that this has taken up an inordinate time. But, you know, it doesn't really need anything more than a bit of political bottle. And that's been completely lacking over the last 5 years. There's been no political will to deal with this issue. You've all run round defending your, inverted commas, particular centre. And that just will not do. Since 2008, we had Sam McLean produced a framework of day services, and day centres participated in that. We've had a full review. 2010 was public engagement in a day services opportunities. Very, very few people indicated that what they wanted to do was to be in a day centre. I think it was 4%. In 2012, we gave £50,000 to the day centres to prepare for tendering. And since then, we've absolutely bottled it. I don't really understand what we're doing now, going round again to instruct officers to carry out a detailed review of day centres. I'm sorry, we just cannot do that. I think you've got to grasp the nettle and understand that £500,000, you know, to be spent on services is perfectly appropriate, I'm sure, but it needs to be spent in the right place on the people who actually need it most. Some of these people who go to day centres are referred by our services, but some are self-referrals, and the level of needs, I think, is not so completely clear. So what I'm saying here, actually, is 2.3, Chairman, instruct officers to carry out a detailed review of day centres. I'm afraid that doesn't quite cut it. I think you need to be a bit more clear that people should be asked to be prepared to tender, which is what they were given £50,000 to prepare for in 2012. If I was a day centre management committee, I would be absolutely livid at how we have been so hopeless at getting this sorted out. Livid.
Okay, I've got your statement. I'm not sure if there's a question for the officer or not, but it's more a statement than a question, Jane. But item 2.3, the recommendation 2.3, we will have a chance when we get the recommendations to actually lay down in committee what we want seen done there. And I think we should come to that. I think to say a fresh look because of the ongoing situation in terms of integration and the new bills that are about to going through Parliament, Scottish Parliament, and about to become law very soon, will actually have to change the way we've been viewing day centres in the past. And you're right, we're not talking here about a tinker around the edges. We're talking about a major review, looking at each individual day centre, looking at the client group, looking at their customers, looking at their referral systems, looking at their transport systems, the whole shooting match, rather than getting a report which tells us there are 25 people who go twice a week, right? That, to me, isn't a full review. But we'll move on.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And while I say I finally welcome this report coming here and the Social Work Department taking this on, and the fact that we're going to support our day centres, because, like Jane says, we've been talking through the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board for something like 4 or 5 years. And day centres have been under threat for that length of time, and that's what the elderly people that go and the committee there have felt. They have had a great deal of stress trying to come up with the idea of a tender process, what it meant and what they were actually being asked to do. It's never been made clear to them, so there has been a lot of time wasted and a lot of effort put in, but I wouldn't blame the Social Work Committee or the social work staff for that. I think that came through the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board. And what concerns me, that while we're here saying, here's one more year, we're still putting the stress back on, because what happens the year after? Because if this goes back into an integrated service, we know the Health Board really don't value day centres and would be quite happy to see them disappear. And I think if you go to 3.3. Day centres are part of the lower tier of day services framework and provide services such as meals, activities, social inclusion and wider information and signposting services. What value do we put on that? Because I remember probably 6-7 years ago, there was a look at day centres and it suggested that with its activities, it actually saved the social work department £4 million a year because the people going to the day centre did not end up into the social work net or the health board net by needing admission to hospital because they were getting meals, they were getting social inclusion and they were being looked after. Now, what value do we put on that? How do we integrate that into whatever's going to be decided? Because I think 3.3 probably is the crux of the whole matter. That's the bit everybody's trying to deny and avoid. But take that away, take that social inclusion and that meal every day away, and how many of that 400 do we actually see within our services costing us money? And I say, when it was looked at 5-6 years ago, it suggested it was as much as £4 million.
Dennis, I'm in general agreement with what you're saying there because we actually don't have a clear position yet in actual fact whether day centres are a social work asset or they're a wider council asset. And that again, it's the terms of 2.3 that will be crucial in this whole process here, how we take this forward. Roberta?
Thank you, Chair. I fully understand everyone's position in this, and some of the issues have been quite contentious that have been raised. However, only 2% of people perhaps use day centres. Do we then equate that to only 4% of people or 4.5% of people in Scotland going to care homes? So do we do away with care homes? I think that's very, that's not adequate thought process into what exactly we are facing. We may have low numbers at the moment, but it may rise. Do we do away with all the resources that we've got? The problem is that day centres do not fit under the Social Work Scotland Act 68. They don't really fit under the health either. But perhaps at some future date, our politicians will find a way to actually recognise the work that day centres do. It is early intervention. We develop early intervention in almost everything, but we seem to ignore elderly people's needs. So I fully support this report, fully support it. And I look forward to the early discussions that will perhaps advance everything that the day centres require.
Thanks, Roberta. Joke?
It's true what folks say, Chair, you learn something every day. The way Councillor Maitland has voted our last power of 5 years, always thought she was in the administration, but that's another point. The 2.3 in the recommendations, I think, is the very important part here, and Councillor Mayo addressed a lot of the issues. We've got to identify what we want from day centres, and we've got to identify what day centres are providing for the elderly people out there that use them. And the social aspect is as important as anything. In all probability, a lot of what Councillor Mayo has said will be true, that because they go there, it saves them falling into a state where they're no meeting or no socialising, and they deteriorate quite quickly and become a liability, if you like, with all due respect to the people involved. But I think we've got to, as it says, carry out a detailed review, but a review has got to be what do we want from day centres and what can they provide. And I would welcome that report. Obviously, you're talking about the middle of the year, and I welcome that report when it comes.
Absolutely, Jock. And I think we need to take cognizance here that the 10 different day centres offer totally different services in each of them. The expertise within the staff in each of them are totally different. The needs of the local people who actually use them are totally different. Right? That's why we need a detailed review. And I'm talking about a detailed review. I'm not talking about, like we talked earlier, we've got 30 people who go twice a week and get their lunch and go home, right? Because that's no review of the people using the day centre. And we need to actually move out. You're right, we need to drive this forward. I've been sitting frustrated on this since May 2012, and you're right, the time for action is now, and that's what we're doing. We're putting it in place, and we'll expect a real full review of day centres when it comes back. Jim, you wanted in?
Thanks, Chair. It's just in the very same point. I think the fundamental question in 2.3 would be, where do they actually sit, day centres? And by that, I mean, if we take it that Health Board, and it was mooted that they weren't particularly happy with the provision that day centres currently provide, We're talking as a council, as a social work committee, for giving her a large proportion of your budget to the Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board, and with it, responsibility for elderly. Now, I would suggest that Day Centre identifies with elderly generally, no maybe specifically. So we need to decide whether or not the Day Centre budget, whatever that might be, goes there, and then they deal with it. And that's a fundamental question, because if no, social work has to deal with it, there has to be a budget in place, and has to be part of the budget process for the next financial year if we happen to agree this today. But we need that information quickly so that we know exactly where that sits. And for want of a better word, the grand scheme of things, that includes our new Community Health and Social Care Partnership Board.
Absolutely. Try and bring this up because, I mean, I see this as a... Sorry, who was somebody else went in? Willie, didn't he?
Yeah, indicated I wanted in, Chair. Just on some of the remarks, and you know, I listened to Jane and then I listened to Dennis, and they seem to be saying completely contrasting issues here. What I got from Jane was, you know, why are we spending all this money, you know, and on day services when there are more needy people out there? Where Dennis, I was taken to be saying the very opposite. In 4.3, you know, it does say to carry out a detailed review. There has been a detailed review for as long as I care to remember on day centres. And here we're going to have another one. The people who run these, and you're right in what you say in terms of their differences and their expertise, they've got their own dynamics and they have their own way of delivering the services. But it's undoubtedly the case that the people in the local areas do value the day centres and in terms of what they do deliver. And the tendering was perhaps for a slightly different issue. And what we always, since all the time I've been here, there's always the case being made that we should be delivering the day services that day centres do deliver, without cutting, you know, the proverbial away and then going on to daycare, dementia services and so forth. Because the day centres are very much valued by the community. And if we look at 5.1 and the figure of 471,000 since 2007 and 8, then it's undoubtedly the case that they've not always had the inflationary uplift. And I actually thought we were given more than the 568,127, because reference has been made to 50,000. I think it was actually 60,000 where Annan got an extra amount of funding on 2013-14. But that money was there for training that, you know, I don't see it being recognised. Because day centres do require extra funding to maintain the services. So if we are to go in, and it seems like there is a consensus to even have a further review, which I don't think is actually necessary, because we do know what the day centres provide. I would like to see, you know, I have continually asked the question, and I'll ask it again today, because Jane referred to day centres and referrals. Then I have continually asked the question in terms of it being a commissioned service to day centres that may save the social work committee and its budget a fair amount of work, money rather, if the day centres were part of the tool in the box for referrals under a commission basis. So in that respect, I don't think we're coming anywhere near to the needs of the day services, day centres at 568,000. That if we're going to review, then we should be reviewing, we should be putting, as Ian Dick said, onto a proper financial system. Dennis or someone referred to as an open and fair system in place. Then we should be including these into our core budget and transferring that into, in 2015, the integrated social care and healthcare budget, Chair. And that's the move we should be making, and recognising indeed that it requires an increase. And my question is, you know, when are we going to get the day centres onto a commission basis as other services enjoy?
That's exactly why we need 2.3, because the evidence we have right now doesn't actually lead us to a commissioned service, because we don't know if we actually look at, I'm not going to steal Sean's thunder here, but in the care that the social work department currently fund, is the number of people who go to day centres actually wouldn't be in the triangle. Can you explain that to the members? Yeah.
I'll do my best to explain. First thing, members got to realise, the social work department deal with the most vulnerable people in our society. Now, I take on board that we have an early intervention and prevention programme going as well. But looking back to your first presentation today, you will realise that we do target our most vulnerable. Now, part of this review has got to assess whether it's early intervention and prevention working with day centres, and how many referrals are social work making to them, and are they saving social work budgets, or should we be putting this budget somewhere else?
Thanks. Ivor?
I think maybe Sean answered some of the question there. It's just we're being asked for a detailed review. But what are the outcomes of that review that we're looking to get? Because, you know, if you ask for a review of a film, you expect to see what it was like, etc., etc. But where are we actually going with the review? Do we know where we want to be at the end so that we can actually put in place? I know it's, you know, you ask a question, you have that's the answer, you go and get me the right question. That's not what I'm asking, but do we know what we want out of it? Because we could review and say it's doing well. And
we would be duty bound to have a review anyway, because as we move towards integration, the need for a new strategic plan drawn up by the integrated board will be designed on the back of deliberations and reviews and ongoing processes within the partners, not just the NHS, not just the local authority, right? Also the third independent sectors and the communities out there themselves. So we would have to do something for that anyway, right? So we're as well having the most up-to-date information that we can get, most pertinent information that then feeds into the work streams, which will work towards the new integrated plan under integration of health social care. And that's the most recent stage 2 amendment, which is going to cause law tomorrow, right? So if that helps, that's the reason why, one of the reasons why this needs to be done. The other one is that we've been increasingly frustrated over the years, and me since May 2012, but some of you for some time before that, is the lack of clarity about what they do. And it just seems to me that there's been an attempt to lump them all into one and deal with them all as one, when they're 10 separate institutions. I'll use it in the broader sense of the word, right? So, and this review will actually then take in the individual needs and concerns of that individual day centre, and the people who use it, and the people who help run it. So, to me, I can't see what the problem is. But it will be a much more detailed review. It will go in right into nitty-gritty, because it will have to, because if it is going to fit into the integrated plan, it will be subject to scrutiny even wider than this committee. There will be full council, integrated board, the health board, and Scottish ministers. So it has to have robust data in it, right? Or else we're going to be liable to have the finger pointed and said you didn't do your job properly. So it's as simple as that, guys. So, you know, Dennis, you went in.
Yeah, and on the back of that, Chair, as day centres started to appear, this council way back had a subcommittee specifically set up which worked with your wife to actually develop what the day centres were going to do. And I really wonder if we're treating this seriously enough, and if we should not maybe look again at either a subgroup or a short-term working group to the end of the financial year to actually take this forward as well, because I really think there's a lot of detail here, and I think members should get involved in it and help design it and take it forward.
Yeah, you know, we did send it for strategic overview to the subcommittee, the integrated board, but as Matthew said, there are no spending powers in that subcommittee, which is why it had to come back here. Because in the past, when we've discussed it at the board, it's been a recommendation which has come back to here, that this is what we do, right? So we're in that, still in that same situation, Dennis, but I take your point entirely, and I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating here in terms of the instructions and the details of the detailed review and how that's got to be done, and how it's got to meet the most very stringent requirements of the integrated plan, which is due to be, which is what they're starting to work on now, of course, because the work streams are on it. So that's how it's going to fit in, and I'm hoping that's kind of reassuring members, but probably answer more questions. But is there anyone else got any questions on it? Ivor?
So can I take it from that answer, we'll be using the review process that was set out in the likes of the scrutiny committee when we do the review process?
Yeah, proper review, yeah. Thanks. So can we move to recommendations, folks? Yeah. Okay, so 2.1, are we agreeing the funding made available to day centres in 2013-14 is continued for the financial year 2014-15? That's 568127. Agreed?
Chair.
Willie?
Yeah, on 2.1, to include or to recognise an inflationary uplift on that £568,000. Happy to move.
Is that an amendment? Have you got a seconder? Okay, no, in that case, sorry, Willie. Take your point, but
note my dissent, Chair.
I'll note your dissent if that's what you want. Yep. So are we happy to agree that the 568127 continues for the next financial year, 2014-15? Agreed? Thank you. 2.2, instruct officers to seek to reduce the potential social work budget pressure of 97096 by a variety of means outlined in paragraph 5.2 in Matthew's report. Okay, agreed, thank you. And 2.3, instruct officers to carry out a detailed review of day centres during 2014-15, reporting back to this committee with the findings from that review no later than August 2014. Maybe I'd like to add in there, or be driven by the wider integration agenda, but no later than that period. So if you can get it back earlier, and it can be done, then so be it, and get an early. Okay, so we agreed with that. Ian?
Could I ask we add on just, I didn't hear the answer to Willie's point about the inflationary uplift, but appreciate what we've actually asked for and managed to get agreement from Social Services budget for the 97 this year. Could we put within the review of that the implications of a inflationary uplift? That could be included. Not a commitment, but obviously a detailed financial review of what it would take if we went down that route.
We'll make sure that all the concerns around the table are included and addressed in the review process. Willie?
Chair, I'm not actually sure what that means. If Ian's moving that, we include an inflationary uplift in the review to be paid in 2014-15, I'm happy to second that. If that's what's being said, because that's what I said in 2.1, but I just want clarity to that we include in the review. So it would need to come back before the budget setting in February for inclusion in 2014-15. I'm happy to second that if that's what's being suggested. But on 2.3, and as part, if it is necessary at all to get into a detailed review, then what I would like to see coming out of that is what's being referred to as the referral process against a commissioned service on in the day centres. To include in that.
I agree that there should be clarity, and again, proof of the pudding is in the eating of it, Willie, and it's the details that we put forward to the senior officers from here, absolutely right, because we want to see everything, not just little bits, we want to see the whole gambit of the day centre and the wider implications and how else they could be used in the integration process, right, because that is something that's not really been addressed up till now. They've been very much on their own thing. Jane, you wanted in?
Thank you. Just what you said there last, the last issue, I think begins to get at it. I mean, because it's not completely clear to me, really, what I'm going to get at the end of this August review. I mean, the outcomes we want for older people are to be healthy and active and engaged. And if we are going to ask what, in essence, can the day centres do for us with respect to people whom we believe need to be assisted in being healthy, active and engaged in society, that would satisfy me. But it needs to be focused on those outcomes for older people. And if the review focuses on those outcomes and comes back and tells me what we would be, in essence, buying from them to achieve that within an envelope budget that we've got here, then I think I've become slightly more satisfied. But the end product should be that we should be commissioning services, if not actually going out to full tender.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that detailed that information that should be forthcoming will then decide, because let's not kid ourselves, this may actually be a combination, a cocktail of different things in here. There may be some commission services, there may be people who are using self-directed support to go there rather than go to the ARC, for example. Right? So there are a number of issues here that weren't on the table when these other reviews, early reviews, had taken place. And we're going round the bit here because I think we've got consensus here, and we're just opening up cans of worms all the time here, and questions for questions' sake almost. So we've been through 2.2, we're at 2.3 now. Right? Are we agreeing to instruct officers to carry out a detailed review of day centres during 2014-15 and report back to this committee with the findings from that review no later than August 2014? Agreed. Thank you.
Chair, I asked for clarity before you came to that in terms of what Ian was at, and I asked, was he moving that includes an inflationary uplift for 2014-15? I'm happy to second that. That's the point I made, and you didn't address it through the chair. Can I ask for clarity again through you, Chair?
Again, what I'm going to say is exactly what happened with the earlier time when we had a vote on something. That would have an impact on budget considerations, which are currently under review. It is not in our gift here to supersede full council. Right? We answer to full council. And so, Ian, would you be satisfied that if the officers, as they take forward this review, were to build in all the risks associated with uplifts?
Yes, absolutely. I recognise that you would rule it incompetent. We've had information in front of us for the 568,000. I was satisfied with the analysis that was given that was affordable under this budget. And there's no point in me asking for an uplift without the proper information in front at this stage. Once it's assessed, then so much the better.
Thanks very much. Okay, move on to item 9. Hi. This is the appointment outside bodies. Jackie was going to be taking us through this, but John, I believe she's tied up somewhere, isn't she?
Yeah, Jackie's got caught on operational issues down in Stranraer, so she's not going to be available here today. The report is very straightforward. Basically, we're looking at 2.1. We're looking for one elected member to be part of the permanency panel. At 2.2, an elected member to be in the temporary fostering panel. And at 2.3, an elected member to be in the Dumfries Community Care Safety Partnership. If you go into 4, 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, it outlines what those particular panels are. So, Chair, very quick.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't think we need any detailed debate on this. I would think we'll move straight to recommendations at 2.1. Permanency panel, I believe we have a nomination. David McKee, you happy to take that job? Thank you. You agreed? Temporary fostering panel, I believe we've got John Simon. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
No elections here, folks. Dumfries and Galloway Community Safety Partnership, we've got a nomination. Ian Dick, any? Okay. So congratulations to the three of you. Let's now move on to item 10, which is AOCB. There's none. We now move on to item 11. Consider adoption of resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A4 of and paragraph 5 and part 1 of Schedule 7A to the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Are you agreed? Agreed.